So, how do you take a math class that feels, well, kind of boring and turn it into a place where students are actually excited to learn? Today, we're going to dive into this incredible study from South Africa's vocational colleges that tried to do exactly that. You've probably been there, right? Staring at a whiteboard full of equations, thinking, am I ever going to use this in real life? For most of us, that's just a fleeting thought. But in some places, that feeling of disconnection is a huge roadblock to success. And that's the exact problem researchers were seeing in South Africa's vocational colleges. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're talking about what are called TVET colleges. That's Technical and Vocational Education and Training. These places are supposed to give students real, practical skills for a career. But they were facing this massive crisis, especially when it came to math. It was like a perfect storm of problems. First off, there was the stigma that these colleges were only for students who weren't academic. Then you had math being taught in this totally abstract way, with zero connection to the real world. Lecturers were under so much pressure that they were just teaching to the test. And the result? The students totally checked out. They became, as the study puts it, just passive listeners instead of actual active learners. Now here's the kicker. The researchers didn't just see a boring classroom. They saw what they called a dehumanizing environment. That's a really strong phrase, right? It means that the students' own lives, their own knowledge, their own experiences, everything that made them who they are, was just completely ignored in the classroom. They weren't seen as people, but just as empty containers to be filled with information. So, if that old way was so broken, what's the fix? Well, the researchers didn't suggest a new textbook or a new formula. They proposed something much more radical, a whole new way of thinking about what it means to teach and to learn. And that brings us to the core idea of this whole thing, humanizing pedagogy. It's a really beautiful concept. It's a way of teaching that starts with the idea that students are thinking, creative human beings. It means their background and their experiences aren't things to be ignored. They're actually a source of knowledge. It's all about building a classroom based on care and respect. Okay, so that sounds great, but what does it actually look like? The lecturers in the study were trained on these four pillars. Number one, you put the student at the center of everything. Number two, you connect what you're teaching directly to their real lived experiences. Three, you work on building real, strong relationships. And four, you get students working together, learning from each other. All right, so theory is one thing, but what happens when you actually try this in a real classroom with real students? This, my friends, is where the story gets really interesting. Let's look at what happened. The change was just dramatic. Before, you had this teacher-centered room where students were just quietly taking notes. Afterwards, the whole dynamic flipped. It became student-centered, buzzing with discussions and students solving problems together. The abstract stuff was out, and real-world relevance was in. And we've got the data to prove it. Before the change, the researchers saw that lessons always started with the lecturer at the board doing homework problems. The teacher was the only one talking. Student engagement? Almost zero. They just sat there, listening and copying notes. And real-life examples? Pretty much non-existent. But after, wow, it was like night and day. Instead of homework, lessons started with big discussions about issues in their community. The students were actually asking questions. The whole vibe became free and active. And get this, every single lecturer was using relevant, real-life examples, talking about things like unemployment or local floods. Here's my favorite example of this in action. To teach fractions, one lecturer didn't start with X's and Y's. They started a conversation about unemployment. A student chimed in, saying a way to make money could be to start a small canteen, selling a quarter of bread. And bam, that was the opening. The lecturer could then ask, okay, so how do we know that's a quarter? All of a sudden, fractions weren't just numbers on a page, they were a tool to understand their world. So we've seen that it works. I mean, the results speak for themselves. But why does it work so well? To really get that, we need to understand the old, broken theory it was designed to replace. And for that, we have to talk about this brilliant Brazilian educator named Paulo Freire. He was a huge critic of traditional education, which he said treated people like they were just manageable objects instead of thinking, feeling human beings. Freire came up with this powerful metaphor. He called it the banking model of education. Think about it. The teacher has all the knowledge, and their job is to deposit it into the students' heads, as if the students are just empty bank accounts, passively waiting to be filled up. That's exactly what was happening in those TV classrooms. Humanizing pedagogy just completely throws that model out the window. It totally flips the script. Instead of a one-way street, it creates this democratic classroom where everyone learns from everyone else. The study puts it perfectly. The roles get exchanged, and teachers become students, and students become teachers. Everybody gets to create knowledge together. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. This wasn't just a small study in a few classrooms. What does this tell us about the bigger picture? What are the implications for how we think about what education is even for? Well, the study is really clear that this can't just be about a few inspiring teachers doing their own thing. It needs real, systemic change. We're talking about building this humanizing approach right into teacher training programs, funding continuous development for lecturers, getting new resources, and totally rethinking the curriculum to make sure it stays connected to the real world. And here's what it all comes down to. The goal of this kind of teaching isn't just about helping students pass a math test. It's so much bigger than that. When you connect math to real social issues, when you value students' voices, you're giving them the tools to look critically at their world and even challenge the injustices they see. You're teaching education as a practice of freedom. So, we'll leave you with this question to chew on. What would our schools and our world look like if every single student was seen not as an empty vessel to be filled, but as a whole person, with a rich life and valuable experiences to share? It's a pretty powerful idea.